Well, we have such a honorable guest with us today on screen from Los Angeles, and I thought that because there's so much, well, not so much, but there is a degree of misunderstanding with the celebration of Kwanzaa in some of our churches, because there is some feeling that it is somewhat replacing Christmas and it's a separate holiday from Christmas, and that is not the case at all. So I thought that we would educate ourselves from the originator of Kwanzaa, Dr. Maulana Karenga, all the way from Los Angeles, and he is quite someone to know and to learn from, and the only way that someone like me can get to someone like that is through one of our trustees and radio personality and activist, Brother Bob Law, in the audience. We thank God for you, sir. Thank God for you. We have friends in high places. So before we go to the screen, I thought that I would just read you, just so you know who you're being educated by. Dr. Maulana Karenga is a professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at California State University at Long Beach. Dr. Karenga is the creator. He is the creator and founder of Kwanzaa. And he is also the author of the authoritative book entitled Kwanzaa, A Celebration of Family, Community, and Culture. Repeat after me: family, community, and culture. He is an activist and scholar. He is the chair and organization of US and the National Association of Quada Organizations, the executive director of the African American Cultural Center and the Kuwaita Institute of Pan-African Studies, and also the chair of the Black Community, Clergy, and Labor Alliance. He has written literally hundreds of scholarly articles and many books, 4 of which are right here: Essays on Struggle, Position and Analysis, Kuwaita and Questions of Life and Struggle, Matt, the Moral Ideal in Ancient Egypt, A Study of Classical African Ethics, Introduction to Black Studies, 4th edition, Oda Ifa, The Ethical Teachings. I've never met anyone who has 2 PhDs. It takes 6 to 7 years to have 1 PhD, and that's a full-time job that you study. But to have 2 PhDs, we're honored to know him. He is also the recipient of many, many awards for his scholarship, leadership, and service. I welcome you now, Dr. Maulana Karenga. God bless you. Enjoy. Greetings, Dr. Karenga. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing your knowledge with us. We are so honored and privileged to have you with us today, sir.
And I likewise am honored to be in the midst of your congregation and with you, Pastor Clemens. Thanks for the invitation and the exchange.
God bless you.
God bless
let's get right.
We wish for you, as we say, we wish for you blessings without number and all good things without end.
All right. Well, I can right off the bat, I can tell we're in for a blessing, right? well, let's get into it. For those who do not know, will you please explain to us what Kwanzaa is and the 7 principles associated with it?
Yeah, and I explain always for those who don't know and those who know and those who assume they know, because It's good to get in deep and in the depth and to know it from the original source, right? And so I wanted to say that, first of all, Kwanzaa is an African American and Pan-African holiday that is a celebration of family, community, and culture. It is a global Pan-African holiday celebrated by millions throughout the world, African community on every continent in the world. And Kwanzaa is rooted in 2 main sources. First, ancient African harvest celebration, the first fruit celebration.
Okay.
And second, the Black Freedom Movement. So let's look at the ancient African first fruit celebration. They're organized around 5 fundamental activities which Kwanzaa builds on and continues. First, it is a time for ingathering of the people to reaffirm the bonds between them as a people. Second, it's a time for special reverence for the Creator and the creation, and thanks and thoughtful recommitment to preserve and protect the world through which the abundant good of harvest is made possible. Third, it's a time for commemoration of the past and practice of the morality of remembrance of our ancestors, whose lives offer inexhaustible lessons and models of human excellence and human achievement. Fourth, Kwanzaa was structured and created as a time to recommit ourselves to our highest cultural values in an ongoing effort to bring forth and be the best of what it means to be African and human in the fullest sense of the word. And five, Kwanzaa is a time for celebration of good, the good of life, the good of family, community, and culture, the good of cultivating, reaping, and sharing the rich harvest of our lives with each other, the richness of the earth itself, fertile fields and forests, and all the good in life.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now this is celebrated 7 successive days, starting the day after Christmas up to the first of the year. And each of those 7 days, I understand you light a candle representing each of the 7 principles each day. Is that correct?
Yes. The candles are black, red, and green. And so we light them, and in a ceremony called lifting up the light that lasts. In the sacred teachings of our ancestors in the Hosea, it is said that we are given that which endures in the midst of that which is overthrown. And that which endures in the midst of that which is overthrown are moral and spiritual principles, which grounds us, orients us, and aids us in directing our lives toward good and expansive ends. And so we light these candles, we are lifting up the light that lasts. And so we light black, red, and green candle. Black is for black people, red is for struggle, and green is for the hope and future that comes from that struggle. So we light the black candle first, then we go to the left to light the red candle, then we go to the green to light the green candle, and we start from in and spread outward, because all things start first inside ourselves and spread out if we do things right. You know, my mother and father used to say charity begins at home and spreads abroad. If we don't strengthen ourselves, how can we help others to become strong also? Okay. Amen. And so the 7 principles are, and they are the hub and hinge on which the holiday turns. They're called Nguzo Saba, which in Swahili means 7 pillars, 7 principles. And the first is Umoja, which is unity. It means to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race, and by extension, the whole world. And then finally, second is Kujichagulia, self-determination. Mean to define ourselves, to name ourselves, to create for ourselves, and to speak for ourselves. Third, Ujima, collective working responsibility.
Okay. To
build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems, and to solve them together. Ujamaa, cooperative economic, to build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together, shared work and wealth. And then Nia, purpose, to make our collective vocation, the building and development of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. But what is greatness? Our ancestors in the sacred text, Hosea says, the wise are known by their wisdom, but the great are known by their good deeds. So we must do good in the world. That is our greatness. And we can talk about that later. And then, of course, Kuumba, creativity, 6th principle. To do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited. And finally, Imani, faith. To believe with all our hearts and our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. Now, ordinarily, people would say, why don't you start with God? Well, you know why I did that? And this is important for you to understand. Yes. I assume God. I don't think people have a problem with God. They have a problem with their people, with their mother and the father, their sister and their brother, with their neighbor. So the question is, can we focus on Black people to do that? And the second reason, I don't want to make it a religious holiday. I want to make it a culture. But I know that the people that come will bring their faith. They're going to bring their faith. Their faith is a lived tradition. And so they will come. So what I want them to do, to show their love of God and the divine and the transcendent by loving each other. Okay. There is a pretty verse in Hosea that says, the good you want to do for God, do it for each other, and especially for the poor, for God stands satisfied when the poor are cared for. That's a beautiful teaching. It is the least among us in Christian language. It is the least among us, the most vulnerable, that proves the morality of any society. How we treat the most vulnerable among us shows what we as persons and a people and a society are in terms of our morality.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, you founded Kwanzaa in 1966.
Yes.
Now, at the time, there was rioting in urban areas in the Black community. There was, and in response to a lot of the police brutality that seemingly was even more rampant then, the Black Panthers were formed as a defense organization and as a community organization. There was job discrimination. You couldn't work where you bought. What is it that you saw in the Black community at that time that inspired Kwanzaa?
I created Kwanzaa in the midst of the Black freedom movement. Sometimes people say after the Watts riot, but we don't call them the riot. We call them revolt, right?
Okay.
And by revolt, I mean a collective act of a people to achieve three things: self-determination, self-respect, and self-defense. Our organization, US, was another major organization in the 60s, like the Nation of Islam, the Republic of New Africa, etc. There was a lot of groups in there. And a lot of times people only refer to one, but it's very important to see that US was also a self-defense organization, right? And we define Black power and revolt in the same way. We said Black power is what? And a lot of times people use that without attribution, but it is the collective struggle of a people to achieve self-determination. That is control over the space they occupy, control over their destiny and daily life, self-respect, right? Returning to their own history and culture, reaffirming themselves, legitimize themselves, authenticating and authorizing themselves in the context of their culture. And then third, self-defense. We argued we're a self-defense organization. We have a right to defend ourselves against oppression, right? We have to do that. It's a normal, as Minister Malcolm said, who was one of our mentors, who said it is a normal human reaction to put up your hand to block people attacking you, right? So self-defense, not aggression, but self-defense, right? And so I created Kwanzaa in the context of this. I was working on my first PhD at UCLA. I left to join the movement. I wanted to put my knowledge to use to help advance the interests of our people in the liberation movement. Mayor McLeod Bethune had said, knowledge is the prime need of the hour. She said, but we will always want to know, what are you going to do with your knowledge? And she said, it's up to us who know to discover the dawn and then share it with the masses of our people who need it most. And so I wanted to create an institution, a process, a practice that contributed to the Black freedom movement. And Kwanzaa then becomes part and parcel of that Black freedom movement. I created Kwanzaa for three basic reasons inside that movement. Number one, to reaffirm our rootedness in African culture, because we had been lifted out of our own culture by the Holocaust of enslavement and made a footnote and forgotten casualty in Europe's history. And so as Amilcar Cabral and Sekou Touré said, our struggle was in part to return to our own culture and history. And that was, as we say in our philosophy, so that we could speak our own special culture truth and make our own unique contribution to how this society is reconceived and reconstructed. And second, I created Kwanzaa as a special time when we as African people could come together, reaffirm the bonds between us, and meditate on the awesome meaning of being African in the world. What does it mean to be the elders of humanity? What does it mean to be the fathers and mothers of humanity and of human civilization, to have been introduced some of the basic disciplines of human knowledge in the Nile Valley? And people from all over the world, Jew, Gentile, Hittite, Hyksos, Roman, Greek, Persian, living, all came to study that. What does that mean in terms of our obligation to know and to use that knowledge for African and human good and the well-being of the world? And then and as you know, more than any other time, millions of people throughout the world African community on every continent in the world celebrate this holiday, come together, reaffirm the bonds between them, and raise up the name African in all its beauty and significance. And then finally, I created Kwanzaa in order to introduce and reaffirm communitarian African values, values that stress and strengthen family, community, and culture. I had asked myself, what is this in my research to do Kwanzaa? Because, I just don't drop from the sky. They don't grow from the ground and they don't float in from the sea. Right?
Yes, sir.
They
Yes,
come
sir.
from the culture in which we find ourselves.
Yes,
so
sir.
I immersed myself in African culture and African languages, right? And I said, what is the social glue and cement that holds these cultures together, gives them their grounding, and reaffirms their humanistic character and their deep spiritual and moral quality? And I said, it is these communitarian values, values that stress and strengthen family, community, and culture, that teach us that we come into being in relationship, right? I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am, and BT said. But in Ubuntu, we say, Ngingo Muntu Ngabantu, which is Zulu for I'm a person through other people. I come into relationship, and every relationship is a responsibility. So before I'm born, I'm already related to my ancestors. I'm related to my mother and father who are producing me. And I'm related to my siblings and other people who live with me and who will come after me. So I'm always in relationship. And that's a beautiful concept. And Kwanzaa gives us these communitarian values. And it is the hub and hinge on which the whole holiday turns. And finally, then I wanted Kwanzaa to be an act of freedom, an instrument of freedom, and a celebration of freedom. Okay. It's an act of freedom in that we did not ask permission to start it. We did not petition the local government or the national government to recognize it. We didn't ask permission. We created it. We named it in our own honor. We broke the catechism of impossibilities that the dominant society taught us, that they create holidays. We simply observe theirs, right? It was important for that act of freedom to break through that catechism of impossibility. Second, I wanted to be an instrument of freedom. And so it is now used to mobilize, organize, and teach the beauty of Africans, and to teach Black people to reaffirm their right and responsibility to become and be self-conscious agents of their own life and liberation, and to honor this divine mission given to us to bring good into the world and not let any good be lost. And finally, then it becomes a celebration of freedom, a value and an appreciation of our struggle to be ourselves and to free ourselves, and a celebration of what we've achieved and continue to achieve in our awesome march through human history.
Okay, that's beyond poignant, and it raises the question: do you feel that the context today is similar to the context of that time in which you founded Kwanzaa, in the light of the pandemic has uncovered, as we know, inequities that we thought were resolved, and there is still police brutality? Do you see similarities that make it just as relevant now as it was when you created it?
Yes, I think that we must, first of all, recognize and respect and show honor for our people who have sacrificed so much and have pushed forward human history and have waged and won with their allies struggles that not only benefited them, but expanded the realm of human freedom and justice in this country. And so people from all over the world and inside this country borrow our moral vocabulary and our moral vision and pose our struggle as a model to emulate. Everybody says just like blacks, the Latinos, the Native Americans, the Asians, white women, right? Gays and LGBTQ people. All of these people borrow our moral vocabulary and moral vision and point to our struggle as a model to emulate and a moral measure of what ought to be done, right? And the same one in Africa, Asia, Latin America, in Palestine, right? In the Arab Spring, people sing our songs, raise our battle cries and our slogans for struggle and pose our struggle as a model. So I want us to know we have advanced, but not yet Uhuru, not yet freedom, right? Not yet justice in the fullness of itself. It's not raining down like mighty waters, right? Justice is still a project to achieve, right? So the similarities are there, as you said, the context of what I call the pathology of oppression, systemic racism, state-sanctioned police and vigilante violence, the lack of adequate health care and housing and quality education and employment. And we say, again, the context is there is no remedy except resistance, no answer and no strategy worthy of its name except struggle. For still, the people, the oppressed want freedom. Right. The wrong and injured want justice. The people want power over their destiny and daily life, and the world wants peace. But it wants a just peace. And yes, Martin Luther King said, there is no peace without justice. Peace is not simply the absence of tension, it's also the presence of justice. Right. And we say, once justice is inside of peace, then we say exceedingly good is the presence of peace. And there is no blame in peace for those who practice it. But again, it must be a just peace. That's why our slogan has always been, no justice, no peace. And so clearly, the philosophy also that underlies my activity called Kawida, which is an ongoing synthesis of the best of African thought and practice in constant exchange with the world. It resonates with Black Lives Matter and other movements like the reparation movement, certainly our Kawida movement, the larger movement for Black lives, the Moral Monday movement, the anti-poverty movement, the abolitionist movement, the anti-gentrification movement, the anti-bail movement, the prison support movement, the environmental justice movement. All these, right? They speak to the constant need to struggle to bring good into the world. And we are part of that. And one last point, under all of this must be, we have argued from our philosophy, Kawida, out of which I created both Kwanzaa and Inclusiveness. Underlying all of this must be the overarching goal of the struggle directed toward African and human good and the well-being of the world. Interrelated, the African and human good and the well-being of the world and all in it.
Okay. So you're seeing Kwanzaa and the principles of it, though it was rooted and created in the context of the Black freedom struggle, connected to struggles of people everywhere, all over the world, in this country, literally internationally.
Yes, yes. And one of the things I want us to do is to see that Kwanzaa has two, and I think we're going to get to it, but I wanted to just say it now. Kwanzaa speaks to the best of what it means to be African and human in the fullest sense. And that's because of two reasons. Number one, it has a dual message and appeal. That is, it's a particular message and a universal message. And second, it has an essential ethical emphasis. It does not deal in theology, but in ethics. It's asked you, what kind of person are you? What are you doing to serve the interests of your people and humanity as a whole and the world and all in it. So all great and the most valuable messages we have in the world have both a particular and a universal aspect to it. They come from a particular people, so it speaks first to them, and then it reaches out and resonates with the best of human thinking. That is the way it is with the religions of the world, for example, the Abrahamic traditions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the ancient Native American tradition, the Asian traditions, and of course, the ancient African tradition. Likewise, the social philosophies of various people, the womanist philosophy of Anna Julia Cooper, the organizational philosophy of Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer, and the social religious philosophies of Martin Luther King and Minister Malcolm X. They speak to the best of what it means to be African and also the best of what it means to be human in the fullest sense. So Kwanzaa is like that. It has that dual message, and so people can appreciate it. And of course, it has an ethical message, not a religious one. And the common ground is thus on ethical basis rather than strictly a religious one. For example, our ethical tradition and our various teachings measure the moral quality of any society by how it treats the most vulnerable. And that resonates with all the other traditions I know.
Right. And that's exactly what I was going to not push back on, but speak on behalf of some preachers. I can hear them now saying, well, that is religious. That's my religious. That's Jesus' religion, to help the least of these.
Yes.
So to show Jesus, Christ likeness in me, to love someone else, especially those who are unfortunate, more unfortunate than I am, less fortunate than I am. So somebody's going to say, many people would say, yes, that is my religion. That's my Christianity, and some of Islam would say that's my religion too.
Yes.
So it seems like there's a fine line, or maybe no line at all, between that type of ethics that serves and Christian and Islam ethics and some other religious ethics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
see, what it is what Malcolm taught us.
Okay.
He said, when we come together,
yes, sir,
we don't talk religion. We talk, he didn't say ethics, but he said we talk what is common to us.
Yes,
and
sir.
That is concern about the way we live our lives, do our work, and ways our struggle. We're talking about a struggle for freedom here. And what I want to do, and I know you can do it, Pastor Clemens, but some people are not categorically precise, and they use religion for everything, which is okay if they want to do it.
Okay.
But we who know and have studied know that religion has two aspects to it, a theology and an ethics, right? Mm-hmm. And the ethics evolved from the theology. But once it evolves from the theology, there is a common language we can talk. For example, the one that's most obvious is care for the poor and the vulnerable, right?
Yes.
Stewardship over and what we call filial obligation toward the world, right? Speaking truth, doing justice, right? Struggling for good in the world. What ethics doesn't have that? That's our basis. We don't need to argue over whose God is what name. We need to talk about how can we bring good in the world? How can we, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, Christian woman, right? How do we let our light shine, right? My mother, let our light shine so that we can glorify our Father in heaven, so that men and women can see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. That's a Christian teaching, but it can resonate with mine because it's the same conversation, right? And so I can say, hey, let me find conversation. I work in coalition with different preachers. I'm a saber, which is a moral teacher in the ancient African Kawidamat tradition, right? So I'm in these coalitions, and I'm in these coalitions based on what? Service to the poor, service to the needy, service to people, social justice issues, social change issues. Right. Our traditions teach us that, and they bring us together because guess what? The best of every tradition meets at a certain point of commonality about goodness in the world. And that's what I uphold. And I bring Africans of all traditions, Christian, Muslim, Black, Jew, Hebrew, followers of the Baha'i, Hinduism. We got some Blacks who practice all that, Buddhism, and also the ancient African traditions of Mat or Ifa, Dogon, Ashanti. They all celebrate Kwanzaa. And what they celebrate is their culture and the goodness that it represents in the name of the people. And that goodness is an ethical unity and a culture unity. And guess what? It does not require us to believe what other people believe in their theology.
Right.
It just requires us to speak truth and to do justice, to love each other, to serve each other. In this beautiful way that Mary McClavatoon told us, so live a life of service that even when we lie down in death, we stand tall on the platform of service. Mm-hmm. Now, what tradition wouldn't say that's a good teaching?
Right, right. So we can look at the ethical playing field, the playing field of truth.
Yes.
And righteousness.
Yes.
That can have the players from all religions play
all
on that field toward the good, toward hunger, toward poverty, the eradication of, toward mass incarceration, the lessening of mass incarceration, and things like that. Those are things, obvious things that are good for the nation as a whole.
Yeah. And for the world as a whole.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So
we want to be a light to the world. We want to be good for the world. We want to be a more, and we are. And this is one of the things I think I've jumped ahead of things, but I'm just saying this is one of the things I want us to see as a people.
Okay.
We are moral and social vanguard in this country. Mm-hmm. We are the ones who must lift up, as we say in our tradition, lift up the light that lasts, right? Dr. King, in his first meeting of the Montgomery, he was a reluctant soldier when he first started, but he came. And that night in Montgomery in 55, he said to the people, let us so work and struggle that years from now, historians will have to say there lived a great people, a Black people, who through their struggle injected a new meaning and morality in the veins of civilization. This is our task and overwhelming responsibility. I believe that. I believe that we are this moral vanguard and this social vanguard for this country and the world. And as I said earlier in my conversation, the world recognizes that, borrows our moral vocabulary and moral vision, and uses us as a reference in their struggle for human rights.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, now you have worked with churches. You have worked with, and well, not only churches,
mass groups throughout the community.
But can you tell us a little bit about what work you have done what collaborative work you have done with people of faith?
Yeah. First of all, I've worked in coalitions since the 60s with preachers. One of our most important ones in the history book is forming the Operational Unity Committee after the martyrdom and assassination of King. I always said the martyrdom and assassination for him and Malcolm, because martyrdom is what they gave. They gave their lives so that we could live full and more meaningful. Yes. Assassination is what their killers did. But what they did must be upheld also at the same time. Amen. And so we built that Operational Unity Committee, and many of the people were preachers. So we pulled together the community together in a positive sense, the Operational Unity Committee. And even today, one of my main organizations is called the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance. I'm co-chair of that, right? And we do economic things. We work with labor unions, but with all the groups, and we form this Black unity, what I call and introduced in the 60s, operational unity. That's a concept I introduced in the 60s. I mean, unity in diversity, unity without uniformity,
Yes,
unity
sir.
in principle and in practice. You got to
Okay.
be principled. Now, you don't have to unite with people that are unprincipled, but you got to be principled, and you got to have purpose, and you got to practice, because we build our strength in practice. We say practice proves and makes possible everything. That no matter how many books you read on swimming, sooner or later you got to jump in the water. So you can make claims about who you are, but until you practice it, you haven't proved it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so also I give Kwanzaa talks and messages for different churches, right? I've
Mm-hmm.
done a lot of those, but I also work in various coalitions, as I said. And one of the things we are very proud of is that we have built 23 rites of passage programs based on my philosophy, Kawaida, and the seven principles of Nguzo Saba, right? And what we were doing with these rites of passages is bringing young Black boys into manhood,
Oh.
teaching them moral and effective ways to work and walk in the world, to walk in dignity affirming, life enhancing, and world preserving ways. And so that has been one of the things that we have really appreciated working with the churches, put in 23 churches rites of passage program. And the boys have grown up, of course, now, but we were able to do that at a time when they reached out and needed that. And we reached back, of course, and told them this is something we could do. Mhm.
Wow. Any on the East Coast? I know you're
No,
based in
we
the.
don't have any. I would love to do some of those, but we have to take time. We have to. And one of the things I really want, Reverend Clemens, is I want us to rebuild the overarching movement where we can talk about these things, how to, in fact, I think you might know this. For example, work with the Muslim. I wrote the mission statement for the Million Man March Day of Absence, which was
Wow.
a collection of the different views that were inside the movement. But I wrote them, I synthesized them and wrote it up. And there were
Hallelujah.
Christian preachers as well as Muslim ministers
That's
there.
right.
And it was just a beautiful thing. And we were supposed to build a movement, but we got interrupted. But I still want, and I told Minister Farrakhan that we need to do that again. We need to get all the great leaders to come together and form a Black agenda. Because one of the things that's happening now with the presidential election and with the election of Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, and President Joe Biden, is that there's going to be a conversation about what is the Black agenda. And somebody with two things might happen.
Okay.
One, people might say there's no Black agenda, there's many Black agendas, right?
Right.
Which is
Right.
really a bad way to start, because
Yes, sir.
as,
Yes, sir.
as we've been talking, there's a lot of commonalities, right?
Right.
But we have to have a structure, an operational unity structure to advance. Second thing that they are saying, oh, the Black agenda, like they used to say with Obama. I defended Obama against the racists, but I had some criticism of Obama, right? But I loved him, and I love Black people loving another Black person. That's to me. I like that, right?
Amen. Amen.
At the same time, we have a moral obligation, right? To say when things are wrong and to challenge people. What I said, I wrote an article for Kamala Harris, and I said, we have to do as we do our loved one, cherish them and challenge them at the same time.
Yes, sir.
And we have to make people know the Black agenda is not the narrow agenda. It's the white agenda that's been a narrow. We have always expanded our agenda and made space for everybody. I made this point many times about even in the Christian church. Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, they praying in the church. The white people picked them up, right? They got to go and build another church, African Methodist Episcopal Church, right? But guess what? They didn't borrow white people. They were inclusive, right? And all the Christian churches I know are inclusive and let white people be off in that. They let white people off. So it's not like something we don't do. So for people to say our agenda is narrow when it has been the most inclusive agenda in the country, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not taking anything from other people of color, because they've had also inclusive genders, right? And not to diminish their struggle, because Native Americans struggled 100 years before or more, before we even got here. And they were our first allies. So I want to always pay homage to them, because when things are underemphasized, you got to overemphasize to bring some kind of balance. So I pay homage to them. And I say this will never be a great country or a just country until it comes to terms with the legitimate claims of the Native American people. And
Amen.
see, people say enslavement, the Holocaust of enslavement was the original sin. No, it was genocide against the Native American. Ours came second. Well, it was the second genocide, but the first one was again, and the Holocaust was first again, the Native American. And I know that might strike people different when I say Holocaust, because you only associate it with Jewish people, and that's a Holocaust. But what does Holocaust mean? It's a morally monstrous act of genocide that is not only against the targeted people, but also a crime against humanity. And certainly the killing of tens of millions of Native Americans, maybe some people estimate 100 million, and tens of millions of Africa have to count as Holocaust. Otherwise, we're privileging white people. And I don't want us to do that. And I don't think we want to do that. And Holocaust is an English word. Shoah is a Hebrew word. And Maangamizi is a Swahili word. So we can have Maangamizi for us, Shoah for them, a Holocaust for everybody that has suffered such tremendous morally monstrous act of genocide. That means the morally monstrous destruction of human life, the morally monstrous destruction of human culture, and the morally monstrous destruction of human possibility, actually turning people into objects of labor, sex, and entertainment. And that's been a problem since.
Okay. Yeah. You said something that I feel the need to probe a little bit as we wrap this up. You said our agenda is perceived as not inclusive.
Yes. And
and I know that's from a historical perspective. Do you see right now a surge of multiracial, multi-generational togetherness in the aftermath of George Floyd, as exemplified by the protests, the so many groups and races represented in the protests of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery? There seems to be something going on that has not been there before. Do you see an improvement there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes. Appreciate what you said, Yvonne St. Gregory. Again, it's important that we be clear-eyed about this.
Okay.
Number one, there is a change.
Yes, sir.
But I don't want to stress it in such a way it decenters Black people. And a lot of times, people focus so much on white people being present, they forget Black people are the ones who brought them there. My statement is this: if Black people don't stand up, white people won't show up.
Okay.
So keep us at the center of our movement. Second, don't overestimate. See, one of the things you have to notice is that it's like on my campus. I told the dean and the president, right? Everybody's ready to say mea culpa. I'm guilty, I've been doing. But the question is finally, how does that translate into practice? And there's three sources of proof here: a sharing of wealth, power, and status. Status, no superior, inferior people. I don't see that yet. I don't hear that yet. I hear white people a lot of time giving us kindness, right? They can give us money, but not pride of place, right? Look at how they treat us in the media and on the campuses, right? And they do it for a minute and they go back home. But we're left with the issue. They're still shooting us in the street. They're killing us under the camouflage and color of law. And that's what racism is. We can't mistake racism for racial prejudice. Racial prejudice is hatred and hostility, right? Mm-hmm. Against people for their difference. But racism is turning that hatred and hostility into public policy and socially sanctioned practice. Okay. Racism is a system of
Right.
denial and defamation of a people's history, humanity, and right to freedom based exclusively or primarily on the false concept of race. And race, stripped of all its pseudoscientific mystification, is nothing but a sociobiological category used to assign human worth and social status, using white people as a model. In other words, the closer you are to white people, the higher your human worth and the higher your social status. That status issue has not changed, and they are privileged by that. And racism is a killer process. It's first of all an imposition of violence. You can't be a racist if you can't impose systemic violence. Second, it's ideological justification for that violence and domination, deprivation, and degradation. And third, it's institutional arraignment to protect, preserve, and promote that imposition and that ideology in the churches, in the universities, in the courtrooms, in the prison, wherever Black people are, in the schools, wherever they are, they promote that. And so I want to change and, first of all, recognize that all people are equal. We're all bearers of dignity and divinity, worthy of the highest respect.
Yes,
Each
sir.
people and culture is a unique and equally valid and valuable way of being human in the world. And there is no superior. No one is more chosen than us. No one is more elect. No one is more whatever people call. We all are bearers of dignity and divinity. Second, can we share some of the wealth we create? Can we? We got a lot of millionaires now, and we got some billionaires. But what does that mean for the masses? And Julia Cooper said, don't confuse individual ascension with the mass people, with the improvement of the masses condition, right? We can't do that. We can't confuse class with mass interest. And what we have to realize is in power, it is immoral to disempower people. Everybody as a child of God, as an image of God, what we said in ancient Egypt, sin and nature, when we first introduced that concept, image of God. Everybody is an image of God. Everybody is a bearer of dignity and inherent worthiness that is transcendent of all social biological characteristics, that is equal in all, and that is inalienable. Everybody has that. We can't even argue about that. It's frivolous and sick to argue against that. But there's no way we can recognize dignity if we don't provide a life of decency for people. How do we do that?
Right.
And so I'm saying that the struggle continues. And I want to just end with this. I know we have run out of time. My argument for people, just as not only a philosopher and a philosopher of ethics, but also as an activist scholar that celebrates our 55th anniversary this year of our organization, US. I say this: if we really love the people, if we want good in the world, continue the struggle, keep the faith, hold the line, love our people and each other, seek and speak truth, do and demand justice,
Yes,
be
sir.
constantly concerned with the well-being of the world and all in it, and dare help rebuild the overarching movement that prefigures and makes possible the good world we all want and deserve to live in and leave as a legacy worthy of the name and history African. And this last point, this is our duty: to know our past and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new world, a future, and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive ways. Thank you so much, Pastor Clemens.
Thank you, Dr. Karenga. Thank you so much. You have been a monumental blessing to everyone listening, to me personally, and I thank you. I thank you from my heart. God bless you and your family, and have a wonderfully blessed new year.
God bless you too. Again, we wish for you blessings without number and all good things without end. And may we all be granted, as we said in our tradition, may we all be granted all things good and pure that heaven grants, the earth produces, and the waters bring forth from their depths.
Amen. God bless you.
Hotel.
Thank you all for listening.